In this episode of the Project Management Podcast, we learn what project managers really think when they hear the word risk. Hello and welcome back to the Project Management Podcast at pm-podcast.com. I am Cornelius Fichtner. We are coming to you live from the 2019 PMI Global Conference in Philadelphia. And with me right now is somebody who said, I'm never going to be attending another PMI Global Conference again. Hello, David Hillson. Welcome back to a global conference.
Oh, you've proved me a liar at last. I'm sorry about that, Cornelius. It's very good to be here, although unexpected.
Yes, and you are also presenting again. So what brought you back?
Well, the last time we spoke, I think, was in Rome 2 years ago, and I said it was the last PMI conference that I'd be attending because I was retiring. And so I said goodbye to all of my friends, and it was the end of an era, and I closed it. And then, of course, this is the 50th anniversary of the founding of PMI this year, founded in 1969. And I'm a PMI fellow, and PMI had a fit of generosity, which is quite unlike them, and made an offer to all PMI fellows to invite us to the conference, to pay for our flights and our hotels and a free conference place.
Right.
Well, with an offer like that, I couldn't refuse.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And for those of you who don't know, the PMI Fellow is the highest recognition that PMI can give to anyone. Usually, there are 0 to 1 PMI Fellows named every year. So this is a very prestigious one.
Well, I'm very honored to have it. I was the only person elected as a fellow in 2010. I think we have 2 new fellows this year coming.
All right. So you're presenting. The title is What People Really Think About Risk. Insights from Neurolinguistics. Now, I don't have to ask you if you have presented this already because we just came out of the opening session. You'll be doing this on Sunday, so tomorrow. What do you expect people will be getting out of it?
Well, I haven't ever presented this before anywhere. This is a world premiere.
World premiere.
And I did some research earlier on in this year to try and understand why people's behavior when we're coming to manage risk is different from what we say we believe. So there's some kind of misalignment between what we say and what we do when it comes to risk and risk management. And so my research was aimed at exposing underlying reasons for that and giving people some tools to change it. So what I want them to come away from is an understanding of why they find a particular aspect of the risk process difficult. Although they say they believe it's right, they don't do it in practice, and then give them something they can use to change either their belief or their behavior or both.
Mm-hmm. Maybe a quick definition before we get started. Neurolinguistics. What is it?
Well, of course, neurolinguistics is a massive topic, and I'm just using a few simple neurolinguistic probes to try and expose some aspects of risk. Neurolinguistics is a way of exploring how the mind, the brain, responds to words and sounds. So it's a way of mapping with second-hand probes, and you can do this directly with functional magnetic resonance imaging, which I don't have access to. So we use remote probes, words and images, and sounds and concepts to expose what's happening subconsciously in the brain.
Mm-hmm. All right. And we also have to acknowledge the fact that your presentation has a lot of images and it's visual, and you really have to see a large part of the presentation in order to follow along. So we're going to try our best to present this here and talk about it. But, to really get the full impact of this, you have to see what David is presenting.
And that's implicit in the neurolinguistic approach, which is images and sounds, and concepts and sounds. So we can do the sounds and the words in audio, but I'll be waving my hands around and nobody can see it.
And I can try and explain it as best as we can.
Let's see how we go.
In essence, you start the presentation with a look at a survey that you did or someone else did?
I did some research in 2001 looking at the way that people understood the definition of risk, because in 2001 there was a big debate about whether risk included only bad things. Mm-hmm. So is risk synonymous with threat? And there was a new idea that there were also good risks, upside risks, positive risks, which we might call opportunities. And in the PMBOK Guide, the 2000 edition, we introduced the idea that risk was a broad concept with two sides, upside and downside, opportunity and threat. And a lot of people were very uncomfortable with that. So I did some research in the year 2001. It was published in one of my books and also published at a conference paper here, exploring what individuals and organizations said and did in terms of a definition of risk and their practice of risk management. And then I repeated that research in January of this year, so 18 years later, just to see what changes there had been in that intervening time. Mm-hmm. And interestingly, individuals and also international standards have come much further in terms of understanding and agreeing this idea that risk includes threat and opportunity. So all the international standards, from the PMBOK guide, the ISO standard, and every other standard in between, all says that risk is a broad concept with threats and opportunities. Most practitioners say they believe that, but only 50% of organizations actually have a risk process that handles both threats and opportunities. So we have 70 or 80% of practitioners and 100% of standards say that we have a double definition, a broad definition of threats and opportunities, but only 50% of organizations actually do it that way. So that was my kind of trigger into the second part of the research, the neurolinguistics, to try and understand why there was that difference between knowing this is what the standards are, saying it's what we believe, but not doing it in practice.
And I have to admit, the PMBOK guide clearly said risks include threats and opportunities. It makes me feel queasy.
Exactly.
Kind of, it's sort of, really? Is that truly it? And I think that is the moment when we have to start talking about cognitive dissonance.
Cognitive dissonance, and that is the heart of my research, is to explore and expose where we have cognitive dissonance when we start talking about risk and uncertainty. So I took 4 terms, uncertainty, risk, threat, and opportunity, and I used simple neurolinguistic probes to understand what people think and say and what people feel in their guts about those 4 terms. And there should be consonance, like a coincidence. There should be a matching between what we think and what we say. Cognitive dissonance is where there's a difference between what we think and what we say, and that causes us to feel uncomfortable.
Like the uncomfortableness that I'm feeling when I'm saying a risk is also an opportunity.
Exactly.
And something doesn't feel 100% right.
It doesn't feel right.
When you said you used probes, we're not talking about putting things on people's heads, right?
No, these are verbal and visual probes.
Okay.
Yes, and questions in a questionnaire.
Okay. So what did you find in the 2019 research?
Let me go back to the definition of cognitive dissonance before we get to that, because there are 3 causes of cognitive dissonance. The first cause is if you hold 2 sincerely held beliefs which are contradictory, and that makes you feel uncomfortable. So my example would be, I'm a good person and I always do bad things. And, it just happens, I know I'm intrinsically good, but I know I'm a failure, or I'm mean, or I whatever. And this is true, and this is true, and how are they true together? And it causes me some kind of angst. A second cause of cognitive dissonance is when you have a strongly held belief and somebody comes up with evidence which proves that it's not true. Mm-hmm. All Germans lack a sense of humor. We all know that. And then you meet some really hilarious German, and there are some of them around here in the conference today, have just a great sense of humor. And you say, well, this can't be true. You can't really be German. You must be Austrian. No, Austrian would be worse, wouldn't it?
I'm not going to go there as a Swiss.
Yeah, exactly. So you're remaining neutral.
Yes.
But it's a fact which is then proven not to be true. So it creates cognitive dissonance. Is that going to offend half of your listeners?
No, it isn't.
Okay. Don't forget I'm English. So, and then the third, so one is 2 strongly held beliefs which are in conflict. A second is a strongly held belief with new evidence. And the third root of cognitive dissonance is when you have a strongly held belief and you behave in a way that is inconsistent with your own belief. So I know I'm a good driver, but most men say they are above average drivers. It just can't be true, of course, because somebody has to be.
The average seems to be low.
Exactly. But I'm a good driver, and then I routinely break the speed limit.
As do all good drivers.
Well, so then I'm not a good driver because I'm driving unsafely. And so my behavior doesn't match my belief, and it makes me feel uncomfortable when I do that. Now, cognitive dissonance is when we feel uncomfortable at this mismatch. And the good thing about cognitive dissonance is that discomfort drives us to change. So when we feel cognitive dissonance, there's a pressure for us to resolve it somehow. And we either resolve it by changing our beliefs or by changing our behavior, or both. So what I'm trying to do in this research is to expose specific areas of cognitive dissonance in the way that we think and act towards risk, specifically in this area of threats and opportunities, to find the focus of cognitive dissonance, and then to use that discomfort as a pressure to change to move us towards the position where what we say we believe, risk equals threat and opportunity, is matched by what we actually do in practice.
Okay. What did the survey show?
Oh, you've asked me that before. Okay, so it's time for arm waving.
All right.
So the diagnostic for cognitive dissonance is a well-known psychological test called the Kiki Effect.
Kiki Bouba.
Kiki and Bouba. Kiki Bouba. And you can check this out on Wikipedia if you want to go that way, or you can look into proper sort of psychological texts and journals. The Kiki Bouba effect was first discovered in, I think it was 1929, and then it was reinforced with new research in 1947, in 2001, again in 2013. So there's a broad evidence base for this. And what it shows, it takes the two imaginary words, Kiki and Bouba, and two visual images. One is of a spiky star, and the other is of a soft, rounded cloud figure.
Yes.
And if you ask people which of the two words, Kiki or Bouba, represents the spiky star, 95 to 98...
Now, hold on a second. Listeners, close your eyes. Think of the word Kiki. Is it spiky? Or is it a round word? Or a round shape that you see? Now, by the way, if you're driving, don't close your eyes. Okay? And now, think of the word Bouba, again, made up word. Do you see a spiky shape? Or do you see a round shape? All right. And now back to you, David. I interrupted you.
Of course. 95 to 98% of the world for the last 100 years, across multiple cultures and multiple languages, business and sort of native peoples, all sorts of people, developed and undeveloped countries, say 95 to 98%, Kiki is spiky and Bouba is rounded.
Which is exactly what I thought as well.
That's what I think. Of course, there are the odd 2 to 5%, so that's not 100%. But there is consonance between the word and the image. Now, what that suggests is that if we find a difference between the application of the word Kiki and the image rounded, it suggests cognitive dissonance, a mismatch.
Right.
So what I decided to do was use that well-known probe of words and images to test 4 words, to test the words uncertainty, risk, threat, and opportunity.
Obviously not with the same 2 shapes. What did you use instead? No,
you have to use the same 2 shapes.
Oh, you have to use the shapes.
It doesn't work with oblongs or...
Okay.
So these are the Kiki Bouba shapes.
Okay.
So I think if I had changed the shapes or the words...
yes, you would have gone in a different direction, and the previous research wouldn't have applied anymore.
Exactly.
Yes, of
so
course.
I was using a proven pair of... a proven set of pairs in order to test something else.
Yes.
So then I say, take the word uncertainty, is it a Kiki or a Bouba? Right. And it doesn't matter what your answer is.
Yeah.
And then take the word uncertainty, is it spiky or rounded?
Yes.
Okay. And so for cognitive consonance, you would expect whichever one of the words you chose to have the matching image as well.
Right.
If there was cognitive dissonance, you would find that whichever word you chose, you would choose, let's say, the wrong or the other image. Okay? And then we do that again for risk, and we do it again for threat, and we do it again for opportunity.
Right.
So the answer, the interesting data is not which word did you choose and which image did you choose, but did you choose the Kiki Spiky pair, or the Bouba rounded pair.
As it relates to uncertainty, opportunity, risk, and threat.
Exactly that.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So I hope our listeners are with us with the arm waving.
And I will place the Kiki Bouba shapes onto the website, and I will try to get permission to copy one of the slides from the deck also onto the website, so you can get a better understanding of what the results are there.
Well, I think I own the copyright, so
okay,
I give you permission.
Wonderful.
Take as many as you
we'll
want.
decide after the recording here which one goes up.
Okay.
And we'll see that on the website.
So in the slides, I show the results of the Kiki Bouba for the 4 words and the spiky rounded for the 4 words. Mm-hmm. That's interesting, but the really important thing is comparing the two.
Yes.
And what we find, and here is the cut to the chase, is that there is cognitive consonance. People have the same feeling about uncertainty and opportunity. So there's a match between whether they said Kiki and spiky and whether they said Bouba and rounded.
Right.
For uncertainty and opportunity.
There's a match there. Okay.
Yes, so they have a kind of a similarity in the way they think and feel about those two terms. Risk and threat show clear evidence of cognitive dissonance. In other words, if you chose Kiki for threat, you also chose Bouba for threat, which is wrong. Or it's dissonant.
Yes, of course, because a threat is more spiky than rounded, sort of in my view.
Or that's you, and other people might say, well, you know, a threat is Bouba, it's kind of amorphous and it's blobby.
Yeah.
But then they give it the spiky image. So we have the mismatch.
Okay.
And this is where we really do need to see the pictures.
Yes.
So for example...
It makes perfect sense to us here.
Yes. So, for example, the risk word is 60-40 Bouba and Kiki, which is interesting. Risk is 60% of people say Bouba.
Oh, that would be the rounded, amorphous, blob-like thing, yes.
Except that those 60% who said Bouba also said spiky shape.
Oh, interesting.
Now we have...
now I understand it. They choose the round word as a sound representation for risk, but they chose the spiky image as a visual representation for risk.
Exactly that.
Got it.
And so here we have strong evidence that there's some discomforts. People have something doesn't feel right about the way we describe risk and the way we feel about risk, and the same with threat. Okay, so that was interesting. That was unexpected.
Very well. So what?
Yes, so what? Well, so now I took 2 other non-verbal probes to just see what it would tell us about this risk and threat issue, shall we say, or potential dissonance. And so I asked 2 other quite interesting and quite left field sort of questions, ones which surprise people. The first is, what colour would you associate with uncertainty or risk or threat or opportunity? And I gave people a choice of 12 colours.
Yes.
So white, grey, black, red, yellow, orange, green, blue, purple, gold and silver. Okay, so they had a full range of colours.
Okay.
Please pick the one which you feel most closely represents the word.
Okay, yes, and there was probably, just off the top of my head, opportunity greenish, risk red, uncertainty yellow. Just if I wanted to guess, and then there was another one, a fourth word,
risk,
threat, orange, reddish,
Yeah, interesting, isn't it?
Yes, and it's you have to think about this.
Well, you don't want to think about it too much.
Yeah, but I could also see other arguments, like gold is an opportunity. It's a golden opportunity, exactly. as the word suggests.
And uncertainty might be grey and
yes,
and
of
fuzzy,
course,
you know.
Yeah.
And maybe threats are black. So
that would work.
So there are definitely other ways of looking at it.
Yes.
So one was colour, and the other was animals. Which animal would you associate with the word uncertainty, risk, threat, or opportunity? And remembering this went to, I think, about 20,000 people around the world, different cultures, different languages, different backgrounds. And there was a completely free text response. So you could say any animal. And we did have some interesting animals, including bacteria and phoenixes and unicorns.
Yes.
And duck-billed platypus somebody had for something. But there was a definite pattern.
Okay.
So the results show, and again, here you really need to see the figures, that for colours, the colours chosen for risk and threat were identical.
Aha.
Red, black, brown.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly, let's say 60 to 80% said red for both risk and threat.
Uh-huh. Right.
And opportunity and uncertainty had completely different colours that didn't correspond to any of the colours in the risk and threat pair.
And that, of course, is important because the definition said a risk includes a threat and an opportunity. So in other words, a risk, and I'm looking at the colors right now, a risk, which is red, includes both a threat, which is red, and an opportunity, which is green.
Mm-hmm.
So,
but it didn't.
Yes.
When people just responded what they felt, with a non-verbal probe, they just said risk and threat the same.
Yes.
Now we go to the other rather interesting thing, which is animals. And, of course, with a completely free text,
you would expect
get
it all.
Hundreds of different things, but not so. So again, we had to group some of these. So there was a big cat group. African people said lions. Indian or Asian people said tigers.
Tigers, yes.
South Americans said jaguars or pumas. But we had a big cat sort of theme, leopards, and so on. We had a snake theme, cobras, vipers, rattlesnakes, pythons, just generally snake. And then we had a shark theme, great white shark, just a shark, jaws, and so on. Exactly the same pattern of answers. Big cat, snake, shark for risk and threat. Exactly. And then uncertainty and opportunity completely different.
Right.
And, we could have some fun looking at what those individual images might show us.
Yes, and I like one of the animals that you're showing here on the survey results. The Internal Revenue Service showed up. That is pretty funny as a threat.
Yes, the taxman was a threatening animal. Yes, sadly. And actually, all of the opportunity animals, or some of the opportunity animals, were imaginary. So unicorns, phoenix, and the goose that lays the golden egg. They were small, like, so 2% or something.
Yeah, but quite still, interesting. I can see where those are going.
A few people said, no, they're just imaginary. But most people said that opportunities were birds, eagles, were high-flying falcons, or were horses that would carry you, stallions that would, ride with you and take you somewhere, or the faithful dog, the guide dog, or the dog who was man's best friend was the opportunity. Those were the majority of opportunity words. Really interesting. But the key takeaway for both colours and animals, risk equals threat clearly.
Yes.
And uncertainty and opportunity are something different.
Okay.
And from the cognitive dissonance, Kiki Bouba, spiky rounded, risk and threat are the areas where we have most cognitive dissonance. So there's a clear gut feeling that risk is the same as threat, exposed by the animals and the colours. But the cognitive dissonance shows that is the area that actually we're most uncomfortable.
Interesting.
So we feel deeply that risk is the same as threat, but we know we shouldn't feel that. Cognitive dissonance.
Understood. Because the definition says a risk is more than just a threat.
Exactly.
And that's where the cognitive dissonance comes in.
Yes. So if we go to our 3 roots of cognitive dissonance, one is where we have 2 strongly held beliefs, which are conflicting. Yep. So here are the 2 beliefs. The PMBOK guide is authoritative and correct for project managers, or the ISO 31000 standard for risk people, or standards are right. Against this strongly held belief, the definitions that say risk includes threat and opportunity are wrong. Risk equals threat. So we have 2 beliefs. I believe the standards are right. I believe that risk is only bad.
Yes.
So they're both true, but they can't both be true. Cognitive dissonance. Okay. Secondly, you have cognitive dissonance if a belief is countered by new evidence. So we all know that risk is only threat. Now you look at, let's say, the standards, or you look at leading organizations, or you look at the views of 80% of risk and project management practitioners who are all saying, no, actually, we get great value from having an inclusive risk process that includes threats and opportunities. And here's all this evidence that it works and people are accepting it and doing it, but I know it's wrong. And that creates dissonance. Or thirdly, where belief and behavior are different. So I believe, I'm a PMP or an RMP, I believe the PMBOK guide is probably right. That's an accurate definition that risk should include threats and opportunities, but my practice is only to look for threats. And that creates a discontinuity, discomfort. All right? So
what do we do with this?
This is where cognitive dissonance turns out to be useful, because cognitive dissonance is uncomfortable. We don't like it. And so it is, in fact, a driver for change. It makes us want to resolve the dissonance, to create a resolution. And so it's a driver to change either our belief or our behavior. You have two beliefs that can't both be right. You have to choose one. If you have a belief which is countered by new evidence, you have to change your belief. Or if your belief and your behavior don't match, one of them has to go. Okay? So I can use this as a risk thought leader, as a PMI promoter to say, or a risk specialist to say, you know, we really need to broaden our view of risk to include threats and opportunities and do it in practice. I can use the cognitive dissonance to say, I know you feel uncomfortable about that, but here are some ways I can help you to resolve that dissonance.
Yes, please.
Okay. And the answer in my mind is to use emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is designed to change our internal environment where what we think is not what we want to think, or what we feel is not what we need to feel. And it's not fake it till you make it, not pretending your mind over matter, but it's genuinely being able to manage yourself to change your perspective. So in the paper, the presentation, it ends up with a recognized emotional intelligence framework that I developed in 2008 with one of my colleagues, which takes you through 6 steps to understand and appreciate where you're coming from. And some of this Kiki, Bouba and animal and color research will help you understand your own view. And having understood and appreciated where you're coming from, you can determine if that's appropriate or not. And if it's not, you need to change. So there's a step in the emotional intelligence process, which is called assertion and action, where you know you need to do something. And that's where most of us get stuck. We experience cognitive dissonance in what we see in the PMBOK guide and what we do in practice, or between our beliefs. And we just go, I'm not comfortable with this. What can I do?
Exactly. I think there's where many of us are stuck with the, well, we only do threat management. We don't really do opportunity management here.
Even though we know we perhaps should be.
Yeah.
And we don't know how to get over that. So assertion and action are the 2 steps in the emotional literacy process which help us get over the hump and make a change. So assertion starts with constructive discontent, with using the power of that discomfort to build a pressure, a kind of a head pressure for change. To say, I'm really not happy with this. Something has got to change. And to spread that discontent. I'm not going to be satisfied with this anymore. I've done it for years. It hasn't worked. I'm out of line with the standards. I'm out of line with best practice. I am going to have to change something. So constructive discontent. And then a conscious choice to change. And I think a lot of us, when we're thinking about change, we kind of want to change, but we don't want to change. My wife has been trying to lose weight for about 5 years. And she says, I need to lose weight. I need to lose weight. I said, well, lose weight. Well, pass the cake, next week, after my birthday, after Christmas, after our holiday. And then she had a little bit of a crisis in the spring of this year, and she really needed to lose weight. And she said, that's it. I'm going on a diet. And in 3 months, she lost 50 pounds. And it's done her the world of good in terms of self-esteem and her health and her mobility and so on, because she made the choice to change. It wasn't just, I ought to do this. So constructive discontent and choice are part of this assertion step. And then being clear about the problem and understanding the benefits of change, and then making an action plan and sticking to it. So in the paper, I give 5 or 6 very clear steps that say, if you want to get over this cognitive dissonance and make a change, here are 5 or 6 steps that you can follow in order to change the way you either think or act or both.
What would you recommend to our listeners who do feel this discontent between risks, threats, and opportunities? What are some of the actions that they can take in order to overcome it?
Well, I think there's a number of things. There's the kind of just do it approach that says, why don't you try it? Just try for 3 months or on your next minor project, just implementing a process that's in line with the PMBOK guide or some other standard that includes opportunities. Take your team through an opportunity workshop to look for ways to work faster, smarter, cheaper. Think about the good things that might happen and how you could capture them if they did. And actually do it and see if it works. So the just do it approach. There's the importance of the facilitator. And this is something that I think we might have talked about before. Facilitation is a really important part of any change process. And the word facilitator comes from a Latin word, facilis, or Italian facile, which means easy. So a facilitator makes it easy for us to change. Takes out the barriers, promotes us, keeps us on track, encourages us as we get along, understands the techniques that will help us, is good with people management. And I think with all of this, a facilitator who understands the goal and understands the barriers can help us get over that blockage and really start to make it work.
How does language help in all of this? Because we talk about the risk management process and we know, we also have to talk about opportunities. What if we just added the word into there and say, instead of calling our process the risk management process, we have the threat management process and the opportunity management process?
Yes, or what some people say is risk and opportunity.
Yes, exactly.
And I know British Aerospace, a big UK defence company, has that. They have a risk and opportunity management process and a risk and opportunity register. And I object to that on one basic fundamental reason, and that is because it creates a distinction between risk and opportunity. So if it's a risk and opportunity process, then obviously the two are somehow different. We're managing them in a common process. But really risk is the bad thing, and opportunities are an add-on. Whereas what we're saying in the PMBOK guide and other standards is that risk is the generic concept with 2 flavors of threat and opportunity.
Threat and opportunity. So we could still call it the risk management process, but we have a threat register and an opportunity register.
Yes, or a risk register with a threat section and an opportunity section.
Yes,
or just a field that tags it with a T and an O to say which it is.
Okay.
And that's what's recommended in the PMBOK guide. As you perhaps know, in the 6th edition, chapter 11, it does say, let's talk about threats and opportunities under the heading of risk. So that's my first objection, is to say risk and opportunity management suggests they're different.
They're different, but they're not. Yes.
They're not. And secondly, it implies that opportunity management is perhaps optional. The real thing is risk management. And maybe we can just not do the opportunity piece, or we do it only on the big projects, or we do it later just when we're a bit more mature, instead of having it as an absolutely integral part of managing risk. So another thing with language that people sometimes suggest is to call it uncertainty management. And maybe uncertainty is a broader word that includes risk and threat and opportunity and variability and ambiguity and complexity and all of that. Again, I see the attraction, but for me, the problem is that risk is a subset of uncertainty. So one of my very early mantras is that risk is uncertainty that matters, because the majority of uncertainties don't matter. So we're not going to do uncertainty management. If we did uncertainty management, we'd be never stopping. There are billions of uncertainties to be managed. So we are managing the risks, which are the subset of uncertainties that matter. So I don't want to call it uncertainty management because that's too broad. And I don't want to call it risk and opportunity management because that makes an unnecessary and unhelpful division. I think we should just call it risk management, bite the bullet and say, this is the way it is.
And slowly but surely either get very comfortable with the dissonance you have, or by understanding that, no, this is what it is, or go through the process of going through the 6 steps that you have suggested.
I would recommend not to try and become comfortable with dissonance because it only grows.
Okay.
You have to resolve dissonance. Otherwise, you have that kind of mental tension, that sense that something is always wrong or something is missing or you're not doing something the way it should be done. And that's the way we're designed, is when that cognitive dissonance occurs, it drives us to say, something's wrong here, I need to change it. And the drive has been so far, when we say risk includes opportunities, people say, well, that feels wrong, so let's not do it. And that's one way to resolve it. But now we have the evidence, it's in the standards, it's in the PMBOK guide, the big organizations are doing it, all the practitioners accept it. And suddenly we find that solution to the dissonance which says, well, let's not do it then, let's just do risk equals threat. Actually, that's not working anymore. And so we have to resolve the dissonance. And I would say, for me, it's not a problem because I've resolved the cognitive dissonance. I'm entirely comfortable with the idea that risk includes both sides of the coin and should be managed together. So, I have purple risk because purple includes red and yellow, or, there's red and blue. And so in my mind, uncertainty is grey, risk is purple, threat is red, and opportunity is blue. And there's a consonance there. It adds up.
Right. So with color theory, that I can very much see how that works. Right. So I would recommend to our listeners to take that potentially as a first step. Look at these 4 words going forward as the colors that David has just suggested.
Yes, and the animals, and really look for the matches.
Yes.
It doesn't really matter what color you choose. What you're looking for is where you pick the similar colors across the 4 concepts to expose to you which concepts you link together and which ones you think are different. And what we should be having is risk is a subset of uncertainty, because risk is uncertainty that matters, and threat and opportunity are both types of risk. And if you can reach that position in your belief and your behavior, you will have cognitive consonance. You will find peace and harmony in your life and in your practice and your thinking about risk and project management, and your life will be more successful. What more could you want? All that from a conference paper.
Wonderful. David, thank you so much for your time again today.
Well, I've enjoyed explaining it, and I hope our listeners can make sense of our hand waving and our alliterations and so on. But it's always good to talk to you, Cornelius, about my work or other things, and thank you for the opportunity.